What happened to the smartest person you went to school with? Wanted to be a doctor, graduated undergrad with a 4.0, passed the MCAT with basically a perfect score, got into every med school they wanted. Then their dad said, "Hey, I want to retire from farming and I'll give you the entire operation as long as your mom and I can live in the second house. I suggest you do the math." So yeah, they are a chicken farmer now. In Canada, chicken farming is printing money because of the quota system, and it's super easy as far as farming goes. They were straight up handed a massive operation that was already fully paid off. I guess he just wanted to be able to, pick up chicks. Being a doctor was one way, he found another way. Story 2. My husband is a PhD physicist. His old college friends are all PhD physicists, and all his coworkers have PhDs. I am absolutely drowning in brain cells that aren't mine. So when I met his boss, who, by the way, is literally one of the top experts in the world in his field, we were hosting a community event for homeschool kids and adults with special needs. I didn't know who he was yet, so I just made assumptions. I cheerfully guided him around like a guest who needed a little extra support, made sure he got cookies and cocoa, and even complimented him on his great grasp of the topic while giving him a tour of his own equipment. Then we ran into my husband, and I realized I had been gently supervising a world-class genius. The next day, his boss went out of his way to tell my husband how kind his wife is. He literally just thinks I'm wholesome. Story 3. He had aspirations to learn and spend his entire life learning. I thought he was going to go into engineering or science, as he was a textbook introvert and loved reading books. As ridiculous as it sounds, I really thought he was going to change the world in some way. We spent our senior year working on physics projects together and studying calculus to prepare for college, and graduated ready to take on life. Then came the cancer, acute myeloid leukemia. In a matter of a year, he was a physical shell of himself, but he was still in good spirits. He never admitted to the pain, but it seemed like it was constant and agonizing. He passed away after 2 years of battling it. R.I.P. CB, you would have changed the world. I hope one day we can play one more round of Civilization on the PC. Story 4. It's quite a sad story. She actually had a heart attack when she was about 16. She was overweight, but not massively by any means, so I think there were some genetic factors at play. But she took it as an opportunity to change, started exercising and eating well, and lost loads of weight, only to then have a seizure while driving at 21. She never had a seizure before or since, so this was completely unexpected. Thankfully, she didn't crash the car and made a full recovery, but what a horrible hand to be dealt at such a young age. She went to university but dropped out after a year due to a combination of ill health and just not liking the environment. As far as I know, though, she's now living very happily with her long-term partner, working as a tutor and author. She was born male and transitioned at a fairly young age, so I know she also advocates for trans issues and does talks on the subject. I haven't seen her in years, but she was one of the kindest, most easygoing people I'd ever met, who never let her struggles get her down, so I love to see her doing well. Story 5. She took our high school quiz bowl team to nationals, got a perfect score on her SATs, and was dating a guy 1 year younger than her. She graduated high school and went to a year of college about 2 hours away. Didn't like college and moved back to be with her boyfriend. They got married and worked service jobs that paid slightly above minimum wage. She kept exploring intellectual things, including computer programming, wrote several games in Ubuntu just for fun. Her friend was in tech and convinced his employer to hire her as a junior developer. The employer was skeptical as she hadn't done a dev bootcamp, worked in tech, or taken a single computer class. But in her early 30s, she started as a developer. Now 15 years later, she is still a developer, making around $150K a year working from home. They never had kids and were used to living on a budget, so now her husband takes care of the house, does the cooking and cleaning, and they are living their best life. Story 6. Grew up in a tough inner city, but she was high school valedictorian, graduating class of 400, went on to Harvard and became a research psychologist and is a professor at Yale. Creator and professor of the most popular class in Yale's history, subject matter, the psychology of happiness. She's my cousin and was my best friend growing up. We do have an age difference. I was in middle school when she was studying at Harvard. On weekends, she would drive down to pick me up and let me hang out in her off-campus apartment in Cambridge so I could just get out of the city. I was 12, using the computer labs at Harvard to print out pictures of Devon Sawa for my bedroom at home. Anyway, she isn't just the smartest person I know, she's quite literally one of the best people I have ever known. Story 7. He got into Oxford or UCL, I couldn't remember. Unfortunately, other friends introduced him to substances and he wasn't mentally able to cope with it. Around 2020, during the pandemic, he cut off contact from all of his friends and nobody has heard from him since. From what I heard right before the pandemic, he had already been struggling with his mental health. There's also a veil of secrecy around what happened to him, as my friends would try to contact his mother and she would just block them. He was a funny and popular guy. We all had fond memories with him. One of the saddest things that a friend said about him was that I still see him in my dreams sometimes. Story 8. My high school valedictorian and salutatorian were separated by millimeters, both positively brilliant, near perfect SAT scores and perfect GPAs. I remember being genuinely excited to see what they become. These were people that could change the world when you are an 18-year-old. I was so excited to see them at our 10-year anniversary and see what they've done. He, the valedictorian, became a doctor like his mother and father, sort of expected. He's done well for himself, although quietly hating it. She, the salutatorian, was a Mormon, socially awkward in high school, but far and away the smarter of the two. She ended up at BYU, got married, then knocked up in her sophomore year and dropped out. She became a housewife. I remember feeling disappointed for her, like somehow her destiny and contribution to society was left untold. Then I realized that she was actually very happy and content with her lot in life. If only we could all be so fortunate. Story 9. Our valedictorian race was a tie between A and J. A wound up winning. She gave a copy and paste speech at graduation, including the often debunked "we don't know how bees fly" line. She went to the most expensive private school in the state, got married, popped out some kids, and got caught up in MLMs. Jay, however, got accepted to the big party school outside the state capital, the one known for drinking. And within a semester, drank himself out of all of his scholarships. My lazy bum took a semester off, then went to the local community college to save money, where I bumped into him. I asked him what in the heck he was doing there, and he said something along the lines of, "Life got in the way." He had cleaned up, found his version of Jesus, joined a church that went around the world to make other people find Jesus, met a gal during a missionary trip to Africa, and fell in love. A year or so later, he asks her to marry him, and they have a quick but holy wedding because her belly looked like she swallowed a bowling ball. At the hospital, she gave birth to a child with a drastically different skin tone than her or Jay. He walked right out of the hospital, deleted any trace of himself from social media, and no one knows what he's up to these days. Story 10. Wanted to cure cancer, did amazing in college, went to work for the NIH after graduation to study cancer, got into an MD, PhD program to study cancer biology and become an oncologist. Diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer, had all the best healthcare and treatments possible, went into remission. A few years later, the cancer came back with a vengeance and spread everywhere, entered a clinical trial as a Hail Mary, passed away from cancer 2 months after defending her PhD dissertation, donated her body to science so her tumor cells could be used to treat someone else's cancer. And the other smartest person, musical prodigy, extremely gifted scientist, and mathematician, taught himself to do VFX art completely on his own and became a micro-influencer. Got into substances in high school just to see what would happen. Went to rehab, relapsed a few times, but was 1000% committed to sobriety. Carried Narcan in case he could help someone else coding. Met the love of his life last year, decided he was just going to finally go to therapy so he could be the partner she deserved. Passed away from substance overuse in July. Story 11. Classic, mega smart kid. Never tried despite being in all IB like AP classes, was always goofing off, playing League of Legends, somehow still was valedictorian. Everyone liked him, but he drove a few people insane because of how little he had to try. Anyways, he went to Duke for a year, planning to be a lawyer before dropping out and pivoting to a different field. That was about 10 years ago. Right now, his LinkedIn says he works for Delta Airlines as an airline pilot. I've heard from a few mutual friends he still has a ton of extra time to pursue video games despite the job, LOL. Story 12. I hope this doesn't sound arrogant, but in my school, everyone agreed the smartest kid was either me or my best friend. We were incredibly competitive, constantly usurping each other's top scores. To me, however, it was obvious. He was clearly much smarter than I was. Fast forward 20 years and the divergence is stark. He is a neurosurgeon. I regularly see photos of him traveling through Europe. Me, I had a complete breakdown in college. It was the crushing weight of what turned out to be undiagnosed autism, coupled with the pressure of a reputation that I was a genius destined for greatness. I realized too late that I wasn't actually that smart. I was just exceptionally good at remembering things I was told. The moment college stopped asking me to memorize textbooks and started asking me to go out and learn for myself, I collapsed inward. I'm doing okay now, but I'm firmly in the making ends meet camp. I avoid anyone who knew me in school because they constantly tell me how they thought I would have made it by now. It's too painful to think about what could have been. I was right about one thing though, my friend really was the smartest. Story 13. For me, the smartest person I went to school with was the stereotypical popular girl, cheerleader, prom queen, and a bit boy crazy. We lived in a small town, so everyone assumed that she would stay in town, marry someone local, and work in real estate or nursing. That's what a lot of girls from my high school ended up doing. Instead, she ended up going to SMU where she majored in finance and minored in French. After, she ended up getting her master's in finance from a top European business school, and now she's the director of finance at a major luxury brand. She was always nice in high school, so it's great to see her go beyond what was expected of her. Story 14. Honestly, it's tough to pin it on just one, but a few in that elite group. I think most of them are off doing cool jobs with families, But the one you can't forget about coding on substances a couple years after high school, I didn't really know him super well, but I was close friends with people that would be. We were a smaller school. I think we graduated with like 250. Everyone knew each other for the most part. He was always a trouble dude. The other people I'm thinking of I would consider kind of nerds, but he wasn't. Just a sociable, popular dude that was a good athlete and casually got a 35 on his ACT without really trying. He was great at everything he did, but he never seemed to like himself. Story 15. I knew this guy in high school who fit the classic smart Asian kid stereotype almost too perfectly. Straight A's, no sports, stacked schedule of academic clubs and extracurriculars. He was an only child with strict Gen X parents and everyone at school knew it. His dad, who was always in business attire, would sometimes show up and scold him right in front of the school. Probably a handful of times. His mom wasn't much different. Whenever she picked him up, he'd sit in the back seat like he was being chauffeured. Never really saw her smile at her son or showed any emotion. She wore business clothes too, like they were both on their way to a board meeting. I remember once he had a band performance and during his solo, his parents stood there watching with completely blank faces, no smile, no nod, no clapping afterward. It wasn't like they were rude to other people, they were perfectly polite, but with him, it was like nothing he did was ever quite enough. By senior year, word got around that he was accepted into places like UC Berkeley and USC. Honestly, it made total sense. He'd always been the type you'd expect to end up as an engineer, a doctor, something along those high-achieving lines. After graduation, he disappeared from my radar. I wasn't really on social media, so I just assumed he went off and followed the path everyone assumed of him. Fast forward 7 or 8 years later, I'm in my mid-20s and walk into some tattoo shop I'd never been to. I'm just trying to get a small piece done, and there he is. The kid I remembered from high school, except now he's covered in tattoos. Full sleeves, ink up his neck, nose piercing, the whole deal. Turns out he's one of the artists there and not just some random beginner, because when I looked him up, he had thousands of followers and was clearly doing well. The shop charged a ton per hour, $150, so he had to be making good income. It was pretty wild. This guy who spent high school buried in physics and science textbooks, who everyone assumed was on a straight path to some prestigious, predictable career, ended up carving out a completely different life for himself. And honestly, he looked way happier than he ever did back then. So this day, I wonder if he cut ties with his parents or if they accepted his choices now that he's a grown man. Story 16. He started partying with the jocks, got in a fight with his popular girlfriend at a bar, went to the car in winter to separate from the situation, was technically intoxicated in a running vehicle to stay warm, had a popular dude try to pull him out of the vehicle claiming they were afraid he was going to drive intoxicated, probably good call. Intoxicated smart guy starts swinging, nearby cop sees commotion, intercepts but gets struck by smart guy. Smart guy doesn't realize it's a cop and thinks he's being jumped, panics, gets in car, locks the door, tries to pull the car out, hits the cop car. Charged with assault on an officer, and impaired driving. I think more charges, but some got dropped and time was negotiated. Just like that, the genius valedictorian ended up in jail. Amazingly kind dude though, got through prison by drawing explicit drawings for prisoners, is now a super successful tattoo artist. Crazy how hanging with the wrong crowd for a few months can change the entire trajectory of your life. I hope he's doing well. Story 17. Passed away from cancer while in college on the path to law school. Not only was he exceedingly intelligent, but well-spoken and charismatic. I went to a high school that served a mixed community, middle class to low income. The school was underfunded but had passionate and caring teachers. In short, it wasn't a great school, but if you advocated and engaged, it could provide a great education and prepare you for college. Most students didn't go to college outside of our school. This guy called out the bad teachers and tore them down with style in class. He could use their arguments and guide them into their own argumentative graves. I was one of those gifted students and have done well, graduated third in my class. This guy was otherworldly and charismatic as hell on top, kind and pulled everyone up. Then he was taken from the world as the top 10 law school acceptance letters started rolling in. The world can be cruel and heartless and unfair, but it gave us a brief time with JB. I miss you, JB. Story 18. Tie between two of them. Harvard, then sold her startup for millions at 20, went to Cornell for law school after undergrad for fun, bought a huge apartment in New York, does whatever she wants, doesn't appear to work for a law firm or anything, just travels as far as Instagram shows. The other one went to MIT, became a literal rocket scientist, and did the classic nerd to hot girl makeover post-college, got LASIK and Invisalign, stopped brushing her curls out into a poof every day, married a hot rocket scientist, had what I imagine are hyper-intelligent babies. Seems extremely happy. I hope she went to some of the reunions. She was super poor and wore homemade clothes through high school, and they were so mean to her. She never gave any craps, she just focused 100% on studying, and I'll be damned if it didn't pay off. Story 19. We were best friends in elementary school. He came from a supportive household that was brick and mortar. I lived in a trailer on cinder blocks with my grandma. The teachers separated him from other students to keep him from being distracted. He received extra help from teachers and staff. It was definitely noticeable. He got extra tutoring and attention. I remember I scored higher than him on the FCAT and he accused me of cheating. I remember his attitude towards everyone changed, like he was better than us. Intellectually, he was. Emotionally, he was a bully. He graduated with a 4.0. I did with a 3.6. He went to Harvard and is a CEO now. I'm an expat and I travel for work. Story 20. A relative never cracked open a book but would get near perfect scores on exams. I watched this kid grow up, and at 5, he'd been reading books on how nuclear reactors worked. He'd even been IQ tested, and basically he was a gifted child. I remember thinking about what this kid could do with his life. His options were honestly pretty limitless. Overpraising led to a hugely inflated ego with extremely lax and irresponsible parents screwing him up so badly. Never made friends because of how incredibly smart he thought he was and how incredibly stupid he made others feel. Did really badly for his O-levels. Dude really thought he'd ace everything without ever studying. Dropped out of tertiary education once, locally, bummed around until the adults in the family cornered him about making plans. He was given a chance and money to study in the UK and came home with a degree. Mucked around for a year, complained about everything, pretended to be expectant about results when the prick failed to submit his final report, which meant an instant fail. Wasted about 40 to 50K for that year of schooling, lodging, and food. Came home subsequently, and it's been a year now. He's still bumming around. No job, no plans, nada. The responsible elders in his life who'd spent years tutoring him, trying to guide him and counsel him all gave up one by one. He even scammed his grandmother of $10,000 saying he needed to pay for something school-related. The kid took the money and went to Selfridges. He said he had trouble banking it in, so he spent it instead. It was just wild listening to everything he put the family through. Story 21. He went to Stanford, then made a crap ton of money at a hedge fund as a quant in NYC, but got out of that game intentionally and went to an Ivy League law school, and he does his own thing. He stayed grounded and active with old friends, found a lovely wife, and has some kids. He probably has investments for life where he doesn't have to work, but he does a lot of business consulting, legal advice during M&As. He's 41. We don't talk about money much. He was one of those kids who might have been bullied, but his elder brother, who was also wicked smart, kind of looked out for him and made sure he was social. Hell, he was probably more popular and well-liked than most of us by the end of school. I think his secret sauce is intentionality. He has goals and plans on how to hit them. He never dated in school but was fine talking to girls. He had an exit strategy and a plan for what to do regarding his finances and career. He's also just a happy person to be around. I should give him a call this weekend. And if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 22. Ended it all. Dude could go one semester with straight A's and the next would be all C's just because the depression hit him especially hard. Dude could break down just about any subject into parts, explain it to anybody. Told me he had done essentially that to the concept of ending it all, broken it down, analyzed it, decided it wasn't worth it. The worst part was that he told me that even after concluding that ending it all wasn't pragmatic, it did nothing to stop him from wanting to pass away. As you can imagine, he was in and out of the psych ward. He even explained his own ideations to me in the context of some psychological theory he had studied, explained that he could recognize that he felt like he didn't belong, and that he knew that that was one of the most significant symptoms. The worst part was that I felt like I couldn't do a damn thing about it. He had thought through it so much more than I had. Some people say they wish they could have done more, but I just wish I could have done anything. Story 23. This is going to sound immodest as hell, but I think it was me actually. My teachers really liked me and said I could do anything I wanted to, but I struggled a lot emotionally and with motivation and never really applied myself. I basically just showed up and it was enough to do exceptionally well. I started studying physics at university, but my mental health got so bad in my first year. I felt completely isolated socially, and my dad got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer that year. I ended up failing out of school and went traveling for the summer, met a Polish girl, and then went to live in Poland and teach English for a couple of years. My dad passed away while I was living there, and I ended up going into a terrible spiral of fixation, alcohol, and grass. But thankfully, I met a very good psychotherapist there who spoke English well, and he helped me a lot, but my GF and I ended up breaking up and I moved back to Canada. Got a job in a warehouse at first and then found one in pharmaceutical production, but I found it boring as heck and it really jaded me and made me hate working for companies, honestly. I want to get a job in the public sector or do something entrepreneurial. Anyway, I continued to struggle for years and I would basically just show up for work, go home and drink and smoke until I passed out, then wake up and repeat ad nauseum. About a year ago, I realized I was probably going to end up in an early grave just like my dad, and I needed to do something. I got back into therapy and found a psychiatrist who would prescribe me Vyvanase for ADHD. I'd been asking for it for like 10 years, but every doctor I talked to either said, stimulants won't help you, or you can't take this stuff because of fixations, you need to be sober first. My new doc told me that's complete BS, and he understands why I have a hard time putting faith in doctors. Haha. I quit my crappy job because I asked them for a 2-week vacation to visit my long-distance GF, and they said no 4 times, so I just stopped showing up, LMAO. I'm back at uni doing my physics degree again, and it's going well, although I'm still struggling with the substance use. But if you asked me last year if I thought this amount of progress would be possible in a year, I would have said no way. It's a long grind, but you just got to keep things moving in the right direction. Story 24. We had 4 genuine geniuses in my year, magnet-type school. One's a financial big shot, one's a corporate lawyer, and 2 are MD specialists. All good, decent people too, which is nice. The thing that made the difference compared to other smart people in our year is they all had successful professional parents that supported and pushed them. None of them ever had money worries or the option of slacking off. But more importantly, by the time they were young teens, they had all 4 absorbed a sense of ambition and mission from their parents. All of them were heavy in clubs, activities, sports, student government, etc. too. That's another thing that I always think about. They were never just focused on academics. Story 25. Did less than 1 semester at Harvard on her full ride, realized she was gay, dropped out, and started working at her girlfriend's, now wife's, bagel shop. Growing up, I honestly felt bad for her. Both parents were professors, she was their only child and prodigy at that. She had no social life outside of the approved after-school clubs that were all geared towards getting her into a top-rated school. She was a sweet, awkward girl who carried too much pressure and was robbed of her childhood. While it's crazy to think she dropped out of Harvard and forfeited a full freaking ride scholarship, I'm happy that she chose her own path in life. Story 26. Smartest kid in my school was this quiet guy who always finished every test before everyone else and somehow still got full marks. Everyone swore he'd end up a doctor or building rockets or something. He went to uni, completely burned out in the first year and dropped out, moved back home, worked in a supermarket for a bit and disappeared off the radar. Now he's fine, just living a normal life, office job, decent money, gym, girlfriend, nothing crazy or genius level, just normal. It made me realize being the smartest in school means nothing once real life starts. Real life trains people in a different way. Story 27. She was the girl who did everything right. She graduated high school with honor roll, high honor roll, and special recognition from the university. The kind of transcript that looks like a blueprint for a perfect life, but when I saw her a few years after college, the blueprint had caught fire. She had started in nursing but dropped out, then she spent a few months tree planting with a boyfriend before heading back to school for environmental sciences. She dropped out of that too and moved back in with her parents. By the time we met for drinks, she'd been living at home for 8 months, paralyzed by depression and with no plan for a job or school. We sat there for 3 hours while she vented about everything that had gone wrong. I felt like I couldn't say a word about my own life. Anything positive would have felt like rubbing it in. It was heartbreaking to see. We had been best friends and she had always been the one leading the pack. That was 10 years ago. We've lost touch since, though the rumors are that she's finally doing better. It was a stark reminder that the momentum of being an overachiever in a classroom doesn't always translate to the friction of the real world. Story 28. I'll answer for my school's valedictorian and salutatorian because the difference became down to an A in gym instead of an A+. One works in software engineering in the military-industrial complex, the other went into finance. Both are doing fine and are pretty down-to-earth people. Hope they're doing well today, though like many of you, I only know their status thanks to LinkedIn. That said, I think the smartest guy is a buddy of mine that cared more about learning than perfection. He spent a lot of time in high school studying ahead and doing well enough in class to skip grades in some subjects, specifically math. He went to college with Calc 1 and 2, multivariable, proofs, linear, algebra, and prob stat done on the county's dime. Had a couple of gen eds done as well, didn't get a 4.0 since some of the classes were tough on him. Now he's a PhD candidate studying n-dimensional D-frequency domain system from a graph theory point of view. He's figured out some wacky new method to automatically separate a target from the background in a video from frame to frame. Story 29. I was one of 3. The smartest lives in our state, got multiple advanced degrees, married a rich guy, and they retired early. She has never worked. The other person did the normal undergrad and works for some company in the UK. Myself, I joined the army, spent time pointing loaded weapons at other human beings, came off active, got an undergrad in design, and have spent 25 years as a designer, developer, and marketer for the same company. I suppose we all did fine by normative standards. None of us are some elite 1%ers. Probably wasted some of our smarts because we didn't have a desire to be like gold-hoarding dragons or workaholics. Have enough to live and be happy. Story 30. It was my best friend all during high school, even after he had to move away. We weren't Ivy League bound, but both did exceptionally well for crappy life circumstances. Dude was a freaking genius and didn't even have to try. We both made 33s on our ACTs. I got into a cozy 4-year college and got halfway through grad before a better opportunity came up, and that's what I do now. He came out as gay to his parents senior year and became instantly homeless. He took his own life. I didn't learn about it until 4 years later. I was a Bible Belt child, so I had no clue he was into me until reflecting on it years later. Story 31. We had a couple of people. A set of very techie twins ended up in Japan teaching English for a couple of years. They were talked into doing some translation for fantasy adult movies that didn't make sense, but names were in the credits. Another brainiac ended up flunking out because he had to manage his own schedule without parents and bought his first computer. He never left his room. He did eventually graduate and is probably fine. The year after, a talented girl auditioned for a symphony and made it. Last I saw, she's had some acting roles, nothing huge. Most smart or popular kids ended up on their asses. Those that were doing okay or bare minimum in school really came alive after high school and did very well. The couple high school reunions were very interesting. Story 32. I was in the Smart Kids Club in high school. One went on to run his family business. He was born wealthy, is still wealthy, and has a beautiful looking family. Another who easily could have been a mathematician turned spiritual, and he runs a church now, also with a beautiful family. The rest of us became engineers and we're doing okay. High middle to middle class. None of us are struggling, but also none of us are still married or have children. I'd like to remarry and have kids, but I'm just not sure it's in the cards. It's hard to trust the process after my partner of 10 years left me, and I'm still not sure what I did wrong. She fell out of love and didn't want to work on it, and I worry that can happen to anyone. Story 33. I'm from a very rural farm town. Our class was 26 and had co-valedictorians. We were also one of the largest graduating classes in quite a while. Before us was 17, after us was 14, so 26 was huge at the time. We had some ridiculously smart people for as small of a town and class we had. Valedictorian 1 is the state transportation engineer for a major U.S. city. Valedictorian 2 is a pharmacist. Third is a tenured professor at a major cancer research university. Fourth does campaign finance for a major political party. There are at least 5 more that are major players in Fortune 500 companies. I was somewhere around number 15 or 16. Story 34. If you're going by GPA with valedictorian and salutatorian status, one went into marketing and one was named top 30 under 30 in marketing and worked in marketing in the food industry and launched their own jewelry line. The other went into journalism for a legacy media company and now works in politics. Not a politician, but is a nonpartisan public servant of some sort that works with politicians. If you'd asked me who I thought was the most studious when I was in high school, one is now a medical doctor and the other went to Cambridge and got a PhD in mechanical engineering and works in biotech, I think. Everyone seems to be doing well and I'm happy for them. Story 35. I don't know, truth be told, I don't remember who was smart as opposed to who was good at working a lot. I was smart but apparently undiagnosed ASD/ADHD, so I barely scrapped by. But I knew some people who were pretty dumb but able to take notes and remember stuff and do all their work, so they got good grades. When I went to the family picnic on my 20th reunion, most of the class who went to the bar the night before didn't show up. One of the guys showed up wearing an Air Force uniform with a 20-year-old Filipino girl and a 6-month-old baby, and then started pestering me online for not being a conservative. Needless to say, I didn't go to my 30-year reunion. Pretty sure nobody missed me and I have nothing but failure to show off anyway. I do hope the smarter people did better than I did, though. Story 36. He's the head engineer of a company that is pioneering fusion energy. Great guy, good friend, though now very busy, and I'm really proud of him. Have another who works at Lawrence Livermore Labs working on things that he is not legally able to tell me about what he works on. And another whose day job is programming, but by night he's semi-internet famous in the VTuber community as an artist. Looking back, I think I was the dummy of our friend groups. Story 37. He was an unbelievably talented mathematician in high school, went on to Harvard and told me that he was average compared to the other students in the mathematics department. After graduation, he became one of the early pioneers in the development of geographic information system software. Unfortunately, he passed away at a relatively young age. The number 2 student in our high school also went to Harvard, acquired a degree in mining geology, and by coincidence lived across the hall from the previously mentioned smartest student in our high school. He soon learned that he was well below average when compared to his fellow students, but still managed to pursue a highly successful career in IT. Story 38. It depends on how you define quote-unquote smartest. If you define it as playing the academic system, stacking advanced placement scores, maintaining a perfect GPA, and earning scholarships to every Ivy League school in the country, then I married the guy who won that race. He sailed through undergrad and completed 2 years at Penn Med before the wheels came off. He realized his entire drive to achieve was nothing more than a survival mechanism triggered by horrific parental abuse. Once that realization hit, he dropped out. He eventually gained 300 pounds and suffered a traumatic brain injury that turned him violent and unsafe. He passed away of obesity-related causes at just 42. If you define smartest by raw IQ and intellectual stamina, that's a different person entirely. She is currently one of the top librarians in the country and runs a tech startup on the side. She teaches college classes for fun and is heading back for her doctorate. One used intelligence as a shield against a nightmare, the other used it as a tool to build a world. Story 39. It really is brutal out there, my friend. I won't go into the long-term repercussions that I think we all in the science realm are worried are coming. However, one idea I will float that's not so much of an option for me now since I only have a master's and now with the tightening they want PhDs more, is to look into becoming a patent agent. The industry and the law firms still want skilled scientists to evaluate and protect their individual property rights to new things, especially in the pharma and biotech areas where that crosses. You don't have to be a lawyer, but you do have to pass the patent bar exam. As long as you have a master's or higher, you can sit for it and pass it. I was going to do that with my master's, but now they're mainly looking for people with PhDs. Story 40. It's funny because everyone referred to me as the quote-unquote smartest kid at my school and most probably still see it that way. But the actual smartest kid at my school was a foreign exchange student that was only there for a year. He became really good friends with my whole group and I still see him whenever I travel to his side of the world. Anyway, I bring this up because our career paths ended up having similar trajectories with wildly varying results. I went to school with the intent to become a doctor. Cardiovascular surgery was what I wanted to do. He didn't end up going to university and started working in a programming job straight out of high school. About halfway through college, I switched my career path and ended up becoming a software engineer. He quit his programming job after a year or two and is currently in medical school. The big difference between him and I is that he got ridiculously good at analyzing financial reports and following specific companies. He basically makes his money to afford living in a very expensive area through day trading. Medicine is his hobby, in his words, and it kind of has to be because doctors don't make very much at all in his country. I ended up deciding not to pursue medicine after thinking about the financial ramifications going into student loan debt to become a doctor would have, and seeing that software engineers had much easier jobs and comparable salaries. Story 41. Before college, he started a nonprofit and raised tens of thousands of dollars for charity, got multiple highly competitive scholarships to different Ivy League schools, studied at multiple of them, and also studied abroad for a time. Played on a D1 college team his senior year. After he graduated, he developed a learning app/program that took off and is now contracted with several NFL teams, the DoD, and other three-letter agencies. The kicker is he's an incredibly kind and compassionate individual, and I'm sure he's doing more behind the scenes for charities. Of all the insanely smart people I've known and heard about, I'm happy he's been able to find success and make the world better through it. Story 42. A good friend of mine since high school. He was a math and engineering whiz that became a VP of strategy for several big tech companies. Traveled the world, always working on cool international projects. Married with 2 nice grown kids. He retired at 50 as a multimillionaire and lives in a quiet community on the waterfront. He still reads constantly and has a well-thought-out opinion on any topic you talk to him about. No one that lives in his community knows about his career, money, or accomplishments, and that's how he likes it. They think he's just a good neighbor who likes to garden, read, hike, kayak, travel, and birdwatch. He's a humble, quiet guy who really appreciates nature and the simple things in life. Story 43. There were co-valedictorians, but our school didn't believe in that, so she became the salutatorian instead. She was more emotionally intelligent than the valedictorian, more athletic, and overall felt like a person. Her parents were Harvard graduate lawyers. Her brother was the head of the Board of Education before 30, and also a Harvard grad, and she was next in line to graduate Harvard. She passed away in her sleep days before her graduation from Harvard. Nobody knows how she passed. Her parents said there was no pre-existing health condition. She just passed away peacefully. It was such a blow to everyone. The valedictorian got a full ride to Duke and became a doctor. Story 44. My high school class had 2 valedictorians, one male, one female, both with 4.2 GPAs. They were dating back then, and today they're married with kids. You would expect their resumes to be filled with high-level degrees and corporate titles, but the reality is a complete subversion of the gifted child track. The guy, who was one of my best friends growing up, went to college for engineering. He took a side job as a meat cutter at a local store, became the deli manager, and dropped out in his second semester. He hasn't looked back since. His wife, who was on okay terms with me and is still friends with my wife, went to college for nursing. She ended up becoming a manager at Walgreens, dropped out of school, and eventually climbed the ladder to become a district manager. Neither of the smartest kids in our class have degrees, and neither of them want one. Then there's me. I was actually making better grades than both of them until a crappy teacher ruined my love for learning. A passion I'm only just starting to reclaim 18 years later. When I tried to go to college, I was told I couldn't because someone messed up my ACT info, making my 27 score effectively worthless. I decided to just go to work. Now, my then girlfriend and I are married with a house and fulfilling careers. We scrape by, but we're happy. Ironically, my wife is currently the only one of us with a degree, and I'm just now working on mine. Story 45. Valedictorian number 1 was a pretty cool dude that didn't stand out in any way, wasn't a jock or nerd, didn't date anyone, was just there. Saw him like 3 years later when he was a best man at a friend's wedding. He has 0 online presence now. Val number 2 got married, had a ton of kids, never went to college. Salutatorian went to college, got her science degree and master's degree, never worked, just graduated, and is a stay-at-home mom. The actual smartest guy in our school was huge into computers in the early 90s, got a degree in electrical engineering, and went to work for Intel to work on the 2nd and 3rd Pentium chip. And if you liked any of these stories, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.